Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. I'm Jim. I'm joined today with Owen and Parker. Parker, it feels like it's been 2 months since I've seen you on a podcast. How have you been?
Yeah, I'm good, man. You had to take a break and you get settled into the spring. New high school, new system. So just trying to figure out everything over there coaching wise. But I'm back at it. I'm back into the film. I watched a handful of prospects last night. The board's already growing and I'm ready to get back after it, man. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Owen, welcome back. It's like I see you a couple times a week now.
Yeah, it's almost like we do 2 shows a week now, Jim. Even though I missed Monday, unfortunately. Yeah. Which I sent. So for anybody that doesn't know, we're going to be doing an episode covering all the MAC, which we're doing on Mondays. We're covering pre-draft scouting stuff. So we're doing a whole episode on the MAC. And I was going through at least like 5 of the guys I found for the MAC went to Virginia Tech. So like I missed the Virginia Tech episode last week, this past Monday. And then every time I go on and try to find, okay, this is the guy I'm going to watch for the MAC. And I just double check, go to watch and see where he's located on the depth chart. And he's not there. I'm like, oh, he must have transferred. Where transferred to? Oh, Virginia Tech. Cool. You covered that running back. I think he was from Toledo that transferred there. Yeah. Because I kept watching their quarterback, Gleason, and I was like, oh, wow, this Stewart guy's good. I should watch him next. And then I go check where he is on there, like what the depth chart is looking like for the running back room. And it's like, oh, no, he's at Virginia Tech now. Cool.
Cool. Well, and ironically, I was watching Newt on the Weekly Huddle channel, catching up on his top 10 wide receivers. So, like, yeah, you're watching the Virginia Tech podcast on this one. I'm watching Newt on your channel. I guess that's just the way it's going to roll. But we are here today to discuss schemes for the Cincinnati Bengals and the New York Jets. And Parker is a draft professor who's a Bengals fan. And then, Owen, you always do a lot of great research. So what did you come up with for the Bengals offensive scheme?
Parker, if you want to go ahead and kind of like as a fan, I'm always interested to hear how the fans line up. Because we did the Bills podcast, the first thing, and I was able to hear Josh's perspective from someone who isn't a Bills fan talking about the Bills offense. So I always like to hear what the fans talk about for their teams first, because I have my scope on it, but I always like to hear from the inside out.
Go for it.
All right. I'm interested to see how it's received, because who's to say how this all everyone perceives is a little bit different, I think. But for the Bengals, I see the offense. We'll start there. I think it's the easiest one. It's the most solid group that stayed together. But wait, am I muted? Can you hear me?
No, you're good.
No, we can hear you. It came in garbled a couple times.
Sheesh. Well, maybe I'll open my mouth a little bit more. No marble mouth over here, huh? Anyway, no, but I think that the scheme is obviously very vertical with T and Jamar on the perimeter. You like T as your kind of 50-50 guy, with Jamar being able to separate extremely well and stack yak. You see a lot of vertical passing game, a lot of big posts, a lot of 9-8-9. And then when you get to the run scheme, it's a lot more gap heavy. They fully, I feel, transitioned out of the wide zone stuff that they were doing for so long when Joe Burrow was first in town. I think they're a very gap heavy team now, letting Chase Brown get vertical in their run schemes. So yeah, it's really just a gap scheme based run system, but it's a lot of just vertical down the field. Let these guys go make plays type of offense. I don't know if you see it the same way, but it's kind of break it down as simple as I can.
Yeah, I think I'm very, very similar with you, especially with the guys they got there is going to make it so that way you're going to want to attack down the field, really filter your offense to those wide receivers. And that running game, I think them switching more to that power style system is more complementary to what they have going on with their receivers and Joe Burrow as a quarterback, being kind of that guy who can dissect you and hit any part of that field with how good he is with accuracy working from the pocket. So you're always going to have teams that are going to give you lighter boxes because you have that. And the whole point of your run offense, if you're the Bengals, is it's not going to be your focal point at all. You're going to have your pass offense be your absolute main point of that offense. But you just need guys to pick up, hard 3-4 yards, fall forward. You got Chase Brown now. You're going to be able to have some more explosive runs out of that. When you're running more man or gap schemes, you have chances to blast open a couple bigger holes, especially instead of like your more wide zone. Even though it does have some upside to it, there's also a potential for you to get behind the sticks in those plays because you're opening up more pathways to be attacked from the backside or from smarter players that can read it first before the running back can. So I think going with the power gap scheme allows them to make it more linear. We're just trying to get a couple yards, and then we're going to dice you up with the offense. We have our top two weapons, of course. You have Gesicki, who's found a good role there at their tight end position. And then you also have some other players who are your depth receivers like Yosivas or Burton, if you can get on the field at all. Charlie Jones is the 4th-round pick for them, who I liked, former UB Bull. But they have a ton of weapons, and you have one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best pocket passing, thrower of the football in the NFL right now, in Joe Burrow. So I'm not really concerned about what they're going to do with the run game. I think that moving to that power gap scheme is more complementary than what they were doing previously, but it all lives and dies with how they're going to be able to move the ball in the air for most games there, especially, which is weird coming from like an NFC North team where you have the Steelers, the Ravens, even the Browns. It's always like smash mouth football, but then you got this kind of more typical of the West Coast high-flying offense with the Bengals, but they have that element that they can punch you in the mouth with. So I don't hate it. I think the only thing I'm concerned about is maybe not as much as in years past, but with the offensive line, they got some pieces now that make me happy. Like I was a big Dylan Fairchild guy, Marius Mims in his second year. You have some pieces that give it some room to grow, and you have some guys who can clear pathways open. But for me, that's still where like my biggest question mark with the offense lies, is how that's going to be cohesive, how they're going to be able to survive through the season, especially against other teams in their division like the Ravens or TJ Watt and the Steelers, and Myles Garrett, where you have just a killer's row of pass rushers, and how they're going to be able to handle that and still perform well on offense despite that being like their weakest link.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, to directly, kind of respond to that, I think one of the more slept on aspects of their offense from last season, at least early on last season, was what they were able to do out of 12 personnel with Eric All. And I know it's kind of that vision's been delayed a year with him most likely not getting any playing time at all this year after recovering from just drama with the knee. But when he comes back, I think if they can get back into those 12 personnel sets and get back into the play action stuff that they really kind of avoided for so long, I think it'll really help open up the offense and allow them to get to some better vertical looks to complement that aspect of the passing game. But I just feel like it's very vanilla right now, but that's almost okay because you just kind of let your guys go out there and be playmakers. You don't need to do anything fancy or complicated. Just let your stars go out and do their thing. And that's why I think, it's pretty bland. You can get a lot of good pieces in, like the, turnstile they had at tight end for so long. They had Gesicki kind of locked in for a couple seasons, but yeah, I don't know. The offense, I think, is just, cut and dry. But I think the defense this year with new defensive coordinator Al Golden is going to be extremely fun to watch. I think their base is going to be a true 4-3, where, you saw the heavy investment in linebacker in the draft. With the linebacker room that I already kind of liked. I thought I had some good youth. Logan Wilson's obviously a nice staple to have in that room. Jermaine Pratt obviously getting moved out to the Raiders. I think he got picked up today after the Bengals released him earlier this week. But I expect to see the 4-3. I'm interested to see how flexible they are in the defensive backfield. I think it's something Al Golden did really well. It was kind of fun to watch when he was at Notre Dame. And the Bengals, I feel like, have so many flexible pieces and a lot of high-end athleticism in that back seven that they can do a lot of fun stuff as the season gets going. But I'm excited to see this defense roll out for the first time, whether it be in the preseason or week one. I'm honestly just excited to see what it looks like. But I don't know what you kind of expect. Obviously, we've got to see what Al did in college in the playoff. But do you think that translates the same, or do you think it looks a lot different?
Yeah, I think it's always hard to project from specifically coaches coming from the college ranks to the NFL ranks. Like, you usually like to have that stepping stone they have from going maybe from a college play caller to maybe an assistant, be able to sit back and watch for a year. Al Golden's been experienced enough that I'm not too worried about it. I'm curious to think what you thought about why when they moved off their last defensive coordinator. I think it's I'm blanking on his name, and I keep getting mixed up.
Lou Anarumo.
Yeah, I always get Lou mixed up with Spagnuolo at the Chiefs.
Good.
But so like with Lou, is what he was doing holding back that defense so much that even though they didn't, like, they added different personnel and they changed up the linebacker core like you're talking about, is there something that like he was doing specifically that wasn't taking advantage of those defensive pieces they had there, which they've had there for a few years? Like some of the guys you're seeing step into some starting roles now are guys who were draft picks for them while Lou was there. So was he just not taking best advantage of that? Is there something that you're looking for Al to do differently than what he was doing? Well, what was he doing that made him a choice to move on from?
Yeah, I know a lot of fans had gripes with the fact that really the vets kind of were given free reign for a lot of the snap count stuff, especially in the defensive line room. You have guys like Joseph Osai and Miles Murphy in that room that you want to see get some run and see what they can do, especially Murphy with the high investment. But then you have guys like Sam Hubbard, though, even though he's playing below average at times and playing hurt. And the same thing, honestly, with Trey Hendrickson when he's playing through a lot of various injuries throughout a season and not really getting rotated out very often. You never really got to see these young guys go. And I think the biggest thing fans had issue with last year was bringing in veterans or bringing back veterans even in the safety room when you have some young talent in there that I think showed a lot of promise last year. You have Jordan Battle, who 2 seasons ago got a bunch of honors as a rookie and then really just rode the bench for his sophomore year. So I think that's what I'm most excited to see from Al is get these young guys involved, kind of start fresh with the roster that we have in Cincinnati and just let these guys get some run and get the best 11 out there. I think there was a lot of times last year in Lou's scheme where they didn't have the best 11 players on the football field for the situation. And I think the complexity that he put into his scheme and what he tried to do internally also really slowed down players. You didn't really get to see the high-end athleticism that is in that back end. So I just really think letting the players play loose, we've heard a lot of players talk about already this offseason, just let them get out there and fly around and see ball, get ball. I think it's going to be really fun to watch personally. I think this defense is really going to be a lot better than people are giving it credit for.
Yeah, I think so. Going back through what their depth chart was, I have pulled up in front of me. Like they have a ton of guys that they even put investments in that you didn't really hear a lot. Like we were talking about Miles Murphy. You have Chris Jenkins in his second year. Joseph Osai was another like day 2 pick that they haven't really put a ton of investment in when it comes to playing time. I think Dax Hill's finally going to find his right home and nickelback for them. That is where he stays, kind of the nickel corner spot. That's where I was a big fan of his coming out of Michigan. I thought specifically as a nickel corner would probably be his best spot, just with how twitchy and explosive he was, as well as being able to tackle. I know they've tried him at outside corner and traditional safety at times. I was also a fan of Jordan Battle. So they've made investments with these picks that in the past, when I scouted them, I liked those guys. I liked those players they invested in. And I was always confused because I remember back when the Bengals made that run to the Super Bowl, Lou was getting a ton of talk about like, oh, he could be the next head coaching candidate. He could be someone who's getting talked up about being a guy that could be the potential on the rise for that. And then they put a bunch of these investments into players that I like. And then for some reason, despite those two factors working together, it kept steadily going downhill. And I was never really sure why that was the case. So I was always curious what that would be. And I can definitely see now, like, yeah, you're right. Like they were drafting these players I liked, but they weren't getting the opportunities to step in. You move on from a guy like Mike Hilton to open up that spot for Dax Hill to play in the slot. You have Jordan Battle now be able to step in where Dax was in the true safety spot and be able to play there. You look at the opposite corner from Cam Taylor-Britt, and it's DJ Turner or Josh Newton, who are also investments you guys made. So you're having opportunities for these guys to come up and play now. And they've kind of taken swings in different styles of player. Like Jordan Battle is a traditional strong safety. Like I said, Dax Hill is kind of like, I guess you consider him, if you were trying to put him in a classic safety position, would be more of that strong safety type, willing to come up and attack the run. But you like him more because he has some of those man cover instincts as like a nickel corner type player. Now you have linebackers and Logan Wilson, who's more of a matchup type, and you have Demetrius Knight, who can be more of that downhill hammer type player in front of this line, which is going to be, even though they lost guys like Sam Hubbard to retirement, they still do. There's still question marks with Trey Hendrickson. They have a stout enough run defense line with Cam Sample coming off injury. You have your D tackle pairing that they paid when TJ Slayton and BJ Hill. So you have good fundamentals for being able to play in the NFC North, stopping that run style defense, and now you have opportunities for growth in that defense with some of these younger players playing. I think for me, the only thing that makes me hold back on this defense, like I'm excited for these young players that I liked coming out of college to step in, is going to be what ends up happening with Trey Hendrickson, because the whole point of this show is like talking about different archetypes of players and different types of players they like to get. And with Trey Hendrickson, he's kind of in that perfect mold for them, where like they've shown with the investments that they make at edge, like they will like these guys who are playing around 270 to 280, who can compress and condense pass rushing, and Hendrickson has an entirely different element to his game that you can add to that, and you can see that with him having so much sack production, especially with the past 2 seasons, even though he's been dealing with injuries. And they've grabbed guys in the past. Like they've recently just drafted Shamar Stewart, another guy who's like between 260 and 280 playing weight. Miles Murphy's guy is 270 plus. Cam Sample's another bigger bodied guy. Joseph Size, who really breaks that mold, is more like that speed rushing type. So you have players in place that match what Hendrickson does, because that's their kind of archetype they like for that edge rushing position. But for me, because they're so unproven, because those young guys haven't gotten opportunities, and then you draft a raw guy like Stewart, you don't really have someone who could step in and make me feel totally comfortable that if this thing with Hendrickson continues following this offseason, I'm not like super confident that they're gonna be able to overcome that, at least initially in year 1 here. If Hendrickson if you could have postponed this for 1 more year, and then Stewart had 1 year to kind of get caught up to speed, Miles Murphy rotates in as that edge 2 and got some snaps along with Joseph Tsai, and then Hendrickson wanted to get out, that probably would have worked out better timeline-wise for you guys, especially moving on from Lou this offseason. But for right now, I think the intersection of when he wants to get out and the timeline you have for these players and this kind of youth movement isn't kind of lining up perfectly with what you'd like.
Yeah, I think that's been the frustrating part, where the plan actually, like the Bengals had it set up, I think, correctly. I think they were really timing kind of a Trey Hendrickson exit. And I think what it kind of feels like to me is Trey Hendrickson kind of just got hip to that idea and, realized he was kind of on the way out. And that's why I think he's looking for the security that he is looking for in the contract he's looking for right now, or rumored to be looking for right now. I think, they kind of had the plan in place and we're working towards it. And I think just kind of the one cog got smart. And now we're kind of in this predicament now. But like you said, I think there's a lot of upside. Like if we can get this youth onto the field and then, if the Bengals can hit on these picks and these investments, they're going to be looking really solid with a good group of guys going into the second contracts with, again, a really young, defensive line coming up, even with guys like Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson coming up behind on the interior. But I mean, if these are all the picks that they think they are, there could be a really strong defense coming out of, this youth movement in going into their prime with this offense that just got paid. It's almost like, this is the strategy that you want to see a team take. But I think the frustration Bengals fans have and why the defenses look so bad at times is, again, I think there's just been some vets that have been able to hang around with Lou that just had a hard time getting off the field, or whether it was their own prerogative or Lou not wanting to put the rookies in and whatever it might have been. And I think getting Al Golden and getting these guys onto the field could really jumpstart this defense. That's why, again, I just think this Bengals defense this season is going to surprise a lot of people, because these young guys, I think, are going to get out there and they're going to do some good things. And I think it's, again, just going to be a little surprising for people, especially coming off of what the defense looked like last season. So I'm personally excited as a Bengals fan, but just seeing the talent that they've brought in and how it's been so underutilized, I'm just excited to see, honestly, what feels like a brand new defense, even though it's not that many new names. It's just the guys you've been wanting to see for years now for some of these guys. So it should be good. It should be fun.
So for like week 1, like you, so if say let's go to the future of Trey Hendrickson either holding out or gets moved off of, or he's holding in with some kind of like fake injury or whatever, and it's week 1 and you don't have him available, who is the guy you're thinking is going to take over and like maybe compensate for that? Are you expecting Joseph Asai, who's probably the more experienced when it comes to these younger guys who haven't gotten options? Like he's gotten at least a little bit of run, as opposed to like Miles Murphy, and then especially like rookie Shamar Stewart. Cam Sample coming off an injury, I'm sure he's gotten some more run than Asai I'm giving credit to before. So then, but who's the guy that you're looking for of those newer names that haven't really got an opportunity to come in, and who's your best bet to be able to supplant Hendrickson and make you forget he's holding out for that moment or not on the team anymore?
I think if we get a Hendrickson holdout in season, I already think that Miles Murphy's on his way to be just being edge 1 on the roster. I think Trey Hendrickson's the only guy right now holding him out of that spot. So if you get a holdout, I do think Miles Murphy becomes edge 1 in the room. And then at that point, I think you have to hope that you can get some early production out of Shamar Stewart. I as much as I do like the upside that Osai has, he's just not an every down guy. And so I do think in that situation, You're gonna have to get a lot more flexible with your edge room and just turn into a very high rotation room where you're getting guys in for situation specific things and just trying to get your best 4 or 5 out there. Just because I do think you're going to be in a little bit of a pickle as far as you don't really have a base guy outside of Murphy right now, in my opinion, with Shamar Stewart being a question mark. But again, maybe Hendrickson sits out and Shamar Stewart comes in and is able to be an impact rookie, and all of a sudden Hendrickson loses even more leverage. So, I mean, that'd be an ideal situation as a fan, and probably for the organization as well, honestly. But I don't know if we can expect that right now. And I'm a huge Shamar Stewart guy. I was pumped about the pick, but I'm super interested to see what he looks like week 1 and how much run he realistically gets. Because I think right now, I mean, the plan is not for him to get a significant amount of run. I mean, obviously he's going to be in the 2 deep, in my opinion, or at least at worst the 3 deep. But I mean, putting him into a starting role would be a little nerve-wracking for me week 1 for sure. But I think he would be in the running for it.
Yeah, and then kind of talking on rookies and starting roles. So they just moved on from Jermaine Pratt, like you talked about. As someone who someone who watched them as much as you did, like I was a big fan of Logan Wilson coming out. Demetrius Knight, I was a fan of coming out of this past draft. Jermaine Pratt, I was kind of lukewarm on when he was coming out as a draft prospect. He's definitely lived up past those expectations I had for him. But were you happy with that move because just trying to get some fresh blood in there? Is there something? Did you get a chance to watch Knight, and how are you feeling about that move specifically of Knight coming in as a rookie starter next to Wilson in place of Pratt? And what was your feelings on Pratt and the situation that they had where they moved on from him?
Yeah, no, I think, when Pratt got re-signed, there was a lot of fans very excited and talking about how it was a great deal and he took a hometown discount to stay. And it ended up, looking like they overpaid for the product they ended up getting out of Pratt on that deal. But it looks like he kind of just fell off and just kind of hit that age cliff. But with Knight coming in, I feel like it's almost like a perfect Pratt replacement with, not being maybe the youngest guy and having experience, but Pratt being a leader in that linebacker room for a long time. It's good to get another experienced guy in there to work with Logan Wilson. And I think he has a very similar play style to Pratt, being a very powerful downhill guy, not afraid to thump in the box. But I do think he's got sneaky athleticism that he can cover relatively well. I mean, you obviously don't want to leave him in coverage. You can let Logan Wilson do that anyway in this room. But I don't think he's going to be a liability when he's asked to cover. And I just think he's a plus in the run game, which they struggled with so much last season. So I'm a big fan of the ad. If you take away the draft pick number next to his name, I'm a huge fan of getting Demetrius Knight on this team, especially in lieu of Pratt, which I think every Bengals fan pretty much saw that pick replacing Pratt. So this move is a little just honestly late as far as we're all concerned, I believe. But the one we saw coming. So I think it's just kind of a match made in heaven, to be honest.
Yeah, so Parker, there's one thing I want to add about the Bengals draft. So first of all, I really like it. The double dip at guard, the double dip at linebacker. But what's most important is I remember all of the mock drafts, and you said, don't take a defensive back. And they didn't, right? So similar to what Owen said, there's been significant investments by the Bengals in their defensive backfield. You were saying it's front 7, guard, running back. Like, those were the positions to draft. So the feedback you were giving during mock draft season, I thought was quite helpful.
No, like I said earlier, I mean, you see the talent they have in that defensive backfield and the youth, right? Like you have all these guys that, they give a significant number of these guys approaching second contracts, which with the Bengals history, especially as of late, we're super excited for that season to come here in the next couple of years as well. But you really just hope these young guys can hit. And if they can, you would have looked a little dumb bringing in another, defensive back in a draft where you only have 6 picks and they stayed at 6 picks like it kind of predicted they would. But yeah, go turn over your linebacker room, go turn over some of your D-line spots and your O-line spots, and just, again, keep leaning into the youth movement. You have your core paid, in my opinion. Go get some of these young guys in so you can keep adding to that core, and you can get to the, today Jim Harbaugh coined Elite 9 that you can, brag about on your team. But I just think the Bengals are a long way from having 9 guys that I can confidently say are the core of this team. So I think getting these young guys in and giving them opportunities is going to be what really defines the rest of Joe Burrow's current contract, in my opinion.
Okay. And question on Fairchild, Rivers, and Brooks. So, Parker, if I understood what you said right, it's pretty much a gap scheme, power and gap running. So, Owen, what was your scouting report on Brooks, Rivers, and Fairchild relative to like what schemes you would have put them in?
So I think the only one of significance really, because like some of the like Brooks and Rivers are going to be guys that are going to plug and be guys that they're not super highly touted. So they're going to come in, you're going to hopefully have them fit whatever they can. So even if they weren't specifically power gap guys, which I didn't really see them as being like exclusive to that when they're coming out, some of them you still expect them just to be competent backup players. I do want to also toss out that they did double dip with those guard spots, but they also added my guy Seth McLaughlin as an undrafted free agent at center. So
yes, they did.
I was a huge fan of him. So he, like, even if you're talking about him, he's another player that kind of fits that same mold where he wasn't. I wouldn't consider him a power gap scheme player. He can play it. Like I think the only thing that kept him from being drafted was his knee injury. He's someone who's capable. He has the frame, the power, and the movement to be able to play pin and pull some of those kind of different plays there at center. Specifically though with Fairchild, that whole Georgia interior three, that was something they ran quite a bit, was some power gap stuff when it came to guard pulling, being able to kick out, man up and take a guy in front of them. That was what they ran a decent bit in Georgia. So for someone like Fairchild, who also had some athletic upside there, he's not just a pure power guy. I think he's the type of player you bring in, and now he's the one of those guys you talked about that is penciled in and potentially be a starter there. He's going to be a people mover, an ass kicker next to Marius Mims. You're going to have a duo there on your right side if he does end up playing right guard that can get that push, that can move some bodies and make that run scheme more effective. So you can definitely see that they were targeting that with their earlier pick, with the guy they were expecting to be a starter for them, whereas their later ones, maybe they weren't the cleanest projection to that, similar like how McLaughlin was not the cleanest projection as a signee, but there are guys that you trust that can come in, fill backup roles, even if they come in and not the greatest when it comes to executing that, they can still come in and be competent players eventually if you grow them to where you want them to be.
And Parker, I'd probably have to go back and listen to you and Drew break down the offensive lineman again, but I think Drew was really high on Rivers, but I don't remember where you were on Rivers.
Yeah, my Rivers' evaluation was a roller coaster for me. Like, I thought he had a very underwhelming Senior Bowl. I thought the film was very up and down, but I really got into it and looked at his profile, when I projected him as a guard, I actually was a pretty big fan of what he was able to do and just the style he played with. What really held me back was just the reps at tackle and projection at tackle. I just never really got behind. Once I looked at him as as a true guard or a flexible even swing guard, I really liked his consistency at that spot and what he's able to do. I think he plays with limited length, but I think he has a lot of lower half strength, which is really what you need at the guard spots on this Bengals team and the scheme that they're running and what they lacked, in previous seasons. So I'm excited I even said when they drafted him, I think Jalen Rivers is kind of a sleeper pick to really push for some time early on in his tenure in Cincinnati. I think he just is a really smooth scheme fit. And I think the versatility is something that the Bengals have always appreciated, especially in the offensive line room. So I just think he's going to have a lot of fans in the building, and that's going to give him some run early on in his career, in my opinion. But I was really pumped about the ad.
Okay. So I think Drew said Jalen Rivers has the best hands of any lineman in the draft? Quickest hands?
I mean, he's got a strong punch for sure. I don't know if I'd say he's got the best hands in the class, but
okay. And yeah, Drew said something to that effect. And Owen, if you haven't caught Drew and Parker, it's late Tuesday, but they don't like the same type of offensive line. So it's hysterical that one will say, yeah, I want him day 2. The other one says, I don't want him anywhere near my team. It's diametrically opposite. Like any of the day 3 guys, they were like diametrically opposite. It was hysterical.
Jim, that shouldn't be surprising you after having watched me and Newt argue over some players the last season there, especially on both sides. We had the guards as well, and we were totally off on some of the guys.
Yes, but I'm just gonna say I thought Parker and Drew took that to an extreme. I'm saying there was another level. I'm just saying. And then I guess Parker, how do you handicap the Bengals running back room? Like, where do you see, like, do you see Chase Brown as an every down player? Do you see Brooks as an every down player, or how do you see it?
Like, I think my dream for this running back room is for, like, out of 100% of the rushes on this team, if we can have Chase Brown with, 40 to 50% of them and Taj Brooks with like 10 to 15% of them, I'm probably a really happy camper at the end of the year. What I think it looks like is I think they do probably treat Chase Brown like more of a bell cow, and I just worry about his ability to handle that kind of workload over the course of a full season. I don't think he's really built for that. I think he'd do well to be in a committee, and I think Taj Brooks is a great player. That's also a pretty balanced player, in my opinion, and could really be a fun addition to help, take some of those reps off of Brown's shoulders. I just worry that they're not going to look at it the same way. And I feel like these kind of back end, these three running backs on the back end are all going to see a decent amount of time, and they're going to have specific roles for all three individually instead of letting a guy really compete for the number 2 spot, in my opinion. So, but yeah, I think Chase Brown's really the bulk carry guy in that room, and they just let the other three rotate through situationally. And I'm a little nervous to see how that works out, like I mentioned, but I think Chase Brown's a great back. I'm excited to see him touch the ball. So I'm all for it for now.
Cool. Well, are we ready to pivot to the New York Football Jets?
One last comment. I've been sitting on this since before we went to defense, but as someone who was a dynasty owner of Eric All since last season, I can definitely say that them moving to 12 is going to be, if Eric All can get back in the field. He was also popping off some good fantasy weeks. Don't get me wrong, he had a couple good games earlier their week, but they can move to 12 personnel. And like you were talking about the backs, like you have Brown, who's more of he's got some size to him, but he also has some pop. He has some of that juice. We also, like you were talking about with Zach Moss and Taj Brooks being some of the more Zach Moss, more limited but bruiser type, and then you have Brooks coming in, kind of the younger, fresher legs. I do think so. Coming from a Bills fan, it sounds a lot similar to the way you described it. Was how they have kind of their system set up right now, where James Cook's getting 45 to 50% of the carries or the touches, or just snaps in general. And then they have two backs that they rotate in, whether it's going to be Ray Davis in the short down situations, or you have Ty Johnson for like third downs and also kind of like closing out moments, where you still have James Cook being the lead back per se. He gets the 1,000 yards, he gets all the recognition, he wants $15 million a year. But then you also have these other two guys that come into play, and you're like, you see these guys get some touches, and you're like, okay, even though we have our guy, if he holds out like potentially was going to happen, you're not super uncomfortable with those other two guys coming in, taking snaps and playing. So I think having more running back by committee, as opposed to like the Bengals always had Joe Mixon was their bell cow for as long as he was there, and they're shifting more towards, especially with the scheme change, they're shifting more towards a scheme where they have guys who can fit that role but have different skill sets to bring to it, which is similar to what like the Bills are working with right now and how they've kind of succeeded with their running back room. So I can kind of relate to that a bit more, especially because like everyone wants the Saquon Barkley's and the Derrick Henrys, but the reality is you have guys that is, if they can specialize in one thing or the other and get even like 50% while still being a specialty back, like James Cook has been with them in their zone scheme, and you have complementary guys behind him, even though that number one guy is not getting 1,500 yards, you can still see him as like the number one guy and proven to be like, okay, he's our best back kind of player.
For sure. And like you said, it's all a volume game. Who's getting the ball? And then what are they doing with it? That's really what it all comes down to. And that's where Chase Brown's the running back in that room. But I'm interested to see how they use the rest of the room personally.
Okay, well, why don't we pivot? The other team we're going to cover tonight is the New York Jets. And we're going to break down their offensive scheme and their defensive scheme and kind of mesh with what our draft evaluations were. So, Owen, first-year coach with the Jets, but if you had to profile their offense, and we have Steve, who's a draft professor for the Jets, in the chat. But Owen, what's your assessment of the Jets with what little we know with the new coaching staff?
So I always keep in touch with the division rivals here with the Bills, including the New Jersey Jets there. And so they brought in with this. They have their Lions coaching staff coming over. They have names escaping me. Head coach
Aaron
Glenn.
Aaron Glenn. Thank you. They have him coming in. I can remember this name for some reason, but they brought in Tanner Engstrand, who was the kind of like heir apparent to Ben Johnson and the Lions, who potentially was going to be their offensive coordinator whenever he took a job. He ended up taking offensive coordinator position now with the Jets. So I'm expecting a lot of similar stuff. Maybe not the level of play calling Ben Johnson has or acumen he has there, but similar styles of offense, having both their head coach and now their new offensive coordinator come from that same tree of coaching and having run that same kind of offense. And you kind of saw that with their first draft class. So you have the Jets going through, they already have kind of their number one guy in Garrett Wilson, kind of matching up with Amon-Ra St. Brown there. But they want to pair him up with a more athletic tight end, someone who can, when you're running some of these deeper digs, you have a threat out of the tight end position, a la Sam Laporta with the Lions, who is taking those underneath drags and pulling the attention underneath and open up the back behind over the middle of the field shots to a guy like Garrett Wilson. So you have that with when they drafted Mason Taylor in the second round. Jeremy Ruckett's more of their typical, run blocking, hasn't really proven much there. And then they're investing in that offensive line where now you're having guys who are maulers in the run game when it comes to Joe Tippmann, Elijah Vera Tucker, John Simpson, and you have some more athletic tackles like Armand Membu and Olu Fashanu, kind of reflective of what they have with Frank Ragnow over in Detroit. You had your athletic tackles and Penei Sewell, who was going out for passes and stuff in that Detroit offense. Like, you have guys who can move at tackle, and then you have some real ass kickers in the middle there at guard and center. So, and then you can also reflect that more so with, even though these weren't additions from the offensive coaching staff taking over, but the running back room they have Breece Hall, who has some dynamic athleticism, can be more of that Jahmyr Gibbs type. And then you have Braylon Allen, this big 6 foot, 220-pound plus running back who could be your bruising in between the tackles, Dave Montgomery stuff. So they have the archetypes there. Even if you look at like some of their depth receiver options, like they have an Alan Lazard who can take on the role of Tim Patrick had in that offense for the Lions last year. They don't have a ton of super good like depth receivers. Like they have Arian Smith, who could be their Jameson Williams because he's super fast, but he struggles with catching. Alan Lazard's not the best player when it comes to being a starting receiver for your offense, but you can see how they're trying to build the pieces there as an offense. Were molded in the form of what a Ben Johnson offense was with the Lions. The one piece they have strayed away from with that, though, has been that all of the quarterbacks they have invested on in that room right now, outside of undrafted free agent Brady Cook, because it's his shot, get another arm to throw in practice. But they have Justin Fields, who can weaponize his legs, Tyrod Taylor, who has always been known as a running quarterback, and then they signed Adrian Martinez, who was using his legs to run all over the UFL this past season. So they're all investments they've made in the quarterback position, again, excluding Brady Cook, have been guys who are going to be able to use their legs on top of executing this offense the way they did kind of with the Lions when it comes to archetypes of players they run. So you have a team that's looking to maybe stray towards a little more towards the running game, or incorporating that running from the quarterback and getting that quarterback run element implemented a little bit more. But they are kind of having the skeleton crew of what the Lions were doing there and trying to replicate what they had success with when it comes to what kind of players they're putting out there on the field for offense, at least early on in this regime's stay there.
So, Parker, what was your assessment of Armand Membu, and what type of schemes do you think he was best suited for?
Yeah, no, I mean, the reason Membu climbed up my board so high toward the end of the process was just as I finished his evaluation, I didn't think he was as scheme specific as people made him sound. Like, people made it sound like Membu was only going to work in a wide zone scheme because he had that athleticism. And I think that athleticism, I mean, obviously would have been awesome in a scheme like that. But I think his ability to just get out in space and play, but also to be a mauler, like a vertical D-line displacement blocker, like I think it's a very underrated part of his game. I said that, while I was evaluating him throughout the process. He's got great play strength. Not only is he athletic, but he's got great play strength. He's able to use his arms and hands very well to out leverage defenders. He's able to get underneath guys and, again, just displace guys off the line of scrimmage and really redictate where that is. And I just an overall good offensive lineman. So I wouldn't really thrown him into any scheme specifically, but I think he's going to look awesome in what I hope is going to be a very, stretch the field horizontal horizontally in the run game type of offense, where you're going to see some wide zone, but you're also going to see some pin and pull. You're going to see some screen game, and I think we're going to see Membu out in space a lot. And I'm personally super excited to watch it.
Cool. And then, I guess from let's say a passing game, if we were to look at the Jets and what we think they're going to be. So, and I think you were the first one I heard comp Arian Smith to Jamison Williams.
Purely the speed. I'm just trying to like make that whole analogy. Like I think it starts and ends with Garrett Wilson and Mason Taylor, but I was trying to just pull names and try to find players that I knew they had on the lines there. They also brought in Josh Reynolds, who's a former Lion, so I mean I could have went that direction, but yeah, it was just Arian Smith jumped out to me as speed guy. They had a speed guy for the Lions. James Williams, infinitely better player than Arian Smith in my opinion, but I do think that was like they have to have that speed element on the outside that they also had in Detroit.
Yeah, so I'm also like the Schitt's Creek moderator of draft podcasts. I will correlate two things together if I can, just to make people laugh. So I'm glad that got a smile out of you. Okay, so I guess the next Jets question. Granted, it's a new coaching staff, but if we look back 2 drafts ago, Parker, what did you think of Malachi Corley?
See, I love Malachi Corley as a college football player, like watching him in season and then getting into that film. I mean, just the explosive potential that he had and what felt like such great field vision, and just like I was excited to see him give it a shot as a returner. Like I just felt like if you could get the ball in his hands and get him in the open field, you're going to have some really exciting moments. And it just feels like it hasn't really been like that, so far in his NFL career. Obviously hasn't been too long yet. Let him settle in a little bit, but he's had some interesting moments for sure. But I'm excited to see him really catch his stride, hopefully soon.
And what do you think?
So in that draft class, I think I could safely say this, a certified Malachi Corley hater. So for me, I also saw, like you said, you can't argue with what Parker said. Like there's explosiveness. He had the build and the impact of a running back in the passing game, where if he got on screens, short slants, hitches, he was able to get upfield and he could make guys bounce off his thick lower body. He looked like a running back in space, very Deebo Samuel-esque. But where I very much pulled back on it was, yes, he's going to do well as maybe a kick returner or in the screen game or designed gimmick touches role. But for me, I didn't see an element of his game where he was going to be a smooth transition to being able to play the rest of the game as a receiver. Like if he was going to come into the game, especially early on in his career, which we've kind of seen, he was going to struggle as a typical, even like a slot receiver. He was going to be a slot. And the problem I had with him was his routes weren't totally refined. And he was a player that, even though he was super physical and aggressive with the ball in his hands, he would truck guys would just fall off of him, trying to tackle him. When he was in route or coming off the line of scrimmage, he would get bullied. I think it was Denzel Burke in a game against Western Kentucky when I was watching him shade Corley in the slot. Absolutely ate his lunch. Like could not. And Denzel Burke wasn't a great corner prospect. Like he had some hype, but I wouldn't describe him as someone who you think is going to be this mean mugging, like press man corner. And even to this point, he hasn't really been a great NFL corner. So like he was getting absolutely demolished in the open space, and he could not get separation just because he couldn't deal with the physicality at the point of the route break. So for me, it was this dichotomy of, okay, he's not, it's kind of how I felt with Savion Williams this year. A guy who, if you get the ball in his hands and he's working upfield, you can see the potential there. But like that's such a limited and niche role in an offense. And especially for Corley's case, what was working against him was having Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback. Like that was a quarterback that wants to have like synergy and chemistry and wants his type of guys. He's not going to just feed this kid the ball because that's what he needs to do. Like he wants to get the ball to his guys how he wants it, and not really have to worry about incorporating other guys. He's got to fit my system. I'm not trying to bend my system to fit him in. So he might have some upside with this new system, especially with a quarterback, Justin Fields, who respectfully is like a one read and go quarterback, even to this point in his career. But like, so that's a bad thing in a lot of cases, but in the case of looking at like a guy like Malachi Corley, you have an offense that's going to be limited in what kind of reads they're going to be throwing on his plate right away, at least. You're going to have a player that excels with just getting gimmick touches. And if you can marry those two things together, where you're having Justin Fields not to think about where he's going the ball, just get it to Corley in space, he might see a better uptick in his offense because of the limitations of the quarterback as opposed to what they have with Aaron Rodgers. And it fits more so, like I said, like I don't think he's a true like wide receiver.
So, Parker, Arian Smith, Malachi Corley, who gets more touches from offense this year for the Jets?
The way that I hope this offense goes, I hope it's Malachi Corley because like I said, I'm hoping it's a horizontal run game where you're really making this defense go sideline to sideline. And that's going to open up a lot of your quick game stuff, which is what I think their quarterback room is going to need a lot of, especially early on. It's going to be quick game, trying to get the guys into space early on and let them get yak, and then it's going to be checking it down to tight ends and running backs. It should be at least. And so in a system like that, you hope to see, honestly, just Garrett Wilson and Malachi Corley picking on, slot defenders for a majority of the, first couple months of the season.
Cool. And can we flip to the Jets defense?
Of course. I've slandered their offense enough at this point. We can start taking down the defense too. Okay, I'm not trying to
eat for everybody.
I think the offense is promising, especially with their running game, their backs, and having the quarterback multiplier. There's going to be, and I think because Justin Fields is their quarterback, and they're going to have that more athletic tight end and Mason Taylor. He's going to pop off more so than either of the guys you mentioned with Smith or Corley. So I think there's pieces of that offense that I do like, and I do like their offensive play caller. Garrett Wilson obviously is a stud. So I think their offense will be fine. I think it'll be like league average at best. But I do think that they have some room to grow there. The defense, though, after taking a step back, we'll get to that in a second.
This defense has so much talent that I just don't want them to waste. You know what I mean? Like they have so many guys out there that you want to just let them open up and run around, but then you're always putting them in just disadvantageous situations, whether it's game script or it's situational football. This defense never really gets to get out there and show what they can be. You see flashes of it from time to time, and obviously they have holes. No defense is perfect. But they have like some good building blocks that I hope can just turn into foundational pieces for them and they can keep around. And obviously we'll see how it looks, in a post-Saleh era. I know those are a lot of his guys in there. But I was a huge fan of Aaron Glenn. He's one of my favorite, options in this last head coach hiring cycle. So I'm pumped to see what he's able to do with this group, personally.
Yeah, I think a lot of what the defense hinged on last year was that Quinnen Williams was a one-man show until Will McDonald kind of stepped up later in the season. And I'm still kind of concerned about, they're getting Jermaine Johnson back. Will McDonald now maybe could parlay it into a full season off the edge. But for me, bringing Derek Nottie and having some of these other guys who are depth D tackles, even if they don't rotate it, as Steve's saying in the comments there with their D-line rotations, I don't know if they're taking enough pressure in the interior off of Quinnen Williams. Now, they do have some good backers, and those guys will play a ton. This team's going to play 4-2, probably more 4-3 defense, and they'll stick to it. Even when the Detroit Lions suffered just pandemic levels of injuries to their defense last year, they didn't get out of that. They just kept signing dudes off the street to then play linebacker for them so they could stay in that 4-3 system. So they're going to play that system. They're going to want to play. And I'm worried that the pieces they have there aren't going to be conducive to helping Quinnen Williams, which is really going to be the focal point of the defense and how they can be good. I do think the rest of the pieces around him should get better. Jermaine Johnson coming off of injury, Will McDonald, like I said, full year. But it's that D tackle 2 spot that I'm really concerned about with his defense as a whole. And then moving to the secondary, it's like, okay, so they want to run similar to what they ran in Detroit, cover 3, cover 1, kind of single high guys. They have a roaming strong safety who can play down in the nickel and then also come back and they can run some more deep coverage stuff if they want to, but they want to run cover 1 or some cover 3 that could turn into man down the field more so. And they bring in a guy like A.Z. Thomas who runs that system well, so I think he should get some run early on, especially even though he didn't test the greatest. I'm just not the biggest fan of Brandon Stevens, especially after his rough season last year. in Baltimore. I mean, obviously, Sauce, even though he did replicate his rookie season, is still one of the best corners in the league. He can run any system you want. So being like just telling him to go out there and be an athlete and erase the number one receiver, he'll love to hear that. And then you can just have to figure out who's going to be that number two corner. I wish they would have kept DJ Reed, but I think with the upside of AZ Thomas, it's going to be better for them specifically. So their secondary is a little weird for me. Their safety room, if anything, was just like a lateral move. I haven't been plussed about their safeties and who knows how long. I think Andre Cisco is a free safety. He's been a starter in the past. He's gonna be competent for them back there. Tony Adams as well. I'm not super worried about it, but I also don't think that's like a positive for the team. So their defense has a ton of talent, and they have a ton of talent that's going to work towards the scheme they're running with. The two linebackers they have, which are phenomenal. They're going to play a lot in this defense. Quinn Williams now being in an even front instead of some odd front looks as well will allow him to have some pressure taken off of him with some of those guys returning from injury. And then you have AZ Thomas at corner and then some decent safeties. But there are one or two spots on that roster where I have major question marks, whether it is if AZ Thomas isn't the secondary corner and it's Brandon Stevens, who DT2 is going to be. If they run a third linebacker, who's that going to be? If they run a third safety, who's that going to be? There's pieces from that defense they ran in Detroit, Aaron Glenn ran, that he likes to run and like didn't get away from it no matter what in Detroit, that I don't know if they have the bodies there, at least for this season, to run it as effectively as you might think they'd be able to with how much plus talent they have.
So I'm looking at the Jets depth chart. Their second string defensive backfield is a group of my guys. So they have Jalen Simpson, Malachi Moore, Quantez Stiggers, and AZ Thomas on their second string. Right? All those guys are either rookies or second-year players. So, Parker, what did you have on Jalen Simpson? I believe he was an undersized but highly athletic safety, right?
Yeah, no, Jalen Simpson's a guy that like checks none of the boxes that I love and like my guy safeties, but I definitely saw the ceiling too. And pairing him with a guy like Malachi Moore, like, and that's what I was going to jump into anyway. Was I think, all of my questions with this defense are in the front seven, but I feel so good about the back end of it with the youth that they have in there and the upside. Like I said, Jalen Simpson, a very athletic, rangy safety that you can just put back there and just kind of let roam around. You got a guy, Malachi Moore, that can thump, but can also get back there and he can hang with some deeper routes. I think AZ Thomas is a great, partner for Sauce over the long term. I think they play a lot more similar than people think right off the bat. They're both long. They're both athletic. I'm really excited to see how that duo looks, but I was also a big Azaria Thomas truther, so we'll see how that goes for me. But I'm pumped about the back end of this defense, and I feel like if they are able to generate some pressure with guys who I liked when they were coming out, and Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald, even though they're a little more, situational specific, I think Quentin Williams is a great piece to have. Just, like Owen said, you need to find Quentin Williams a running mate if you're not going to have top-level talent on the edge, because right now your defensive line is really just one guy and some rotational guys on the perimeter. You got to find some ways to not only just create pressure, but just win one-on-ones and be able to, get to every defense is trying to work towards being able to rush with four, right? And the Jets are so far away from that right now. And I just think if they can let this back end kind of settle in and really focus on this front seven the next couple of years, they could have quite the defense once again here in just a couple seasons.
Yeah. So on my simulator, the summer is actually I have some fun because I get to decide the draft order, right? Nobody's played a game. So I have the Jets picking first. And this might be similar to the Madden curse, everybody, because last year at this time I had the Titans picking first. I just usually look at like the 10 worst quarterback situations in the league, and I rack and stack them in the top 10 or finish drafting in the top 10. The Jets have to play the Dolphins, the Bills, and the Patriots. And I don't see them getting a win in the division. Right. So I see them easily being fourth, and then out of, let's say, the other 9 teams that I had decided to pick in the top 10. I just said the Jets look like, for as optimistic as we're saying, I don't see, similar to what Parker said, without the muscle in the front four of the defense, it doesn't matter how good the back end is.
You're gonna. I mean, they're definitely a couple seasons away from being, able to be considered competitive, but I don't think they're that many pieces away. And I think it's all about. I have a lot of faith in Aaron Glenn from a defensive perspective. I'm very interested to see how this offense looks in year one. If they're able to, like I've said, if they can stretch some defenses and create green space and create easy throws, that's where this offense is going to succeed. But this defense, I feel like, is really just missing some investment on that front seven. That can happen very quickly.
Yeah,
if the Jets get pick one and don't take TJ Parker, I just they're hopeless. They're hopeless.
Cade Klubnik, right?
Oh, geez.
No, it's going to be Peter Woods.
Peter Woods. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
So I think with their front seven specifically, especially okay. Luckily for me, the Jets like to draft players I don't like outside of Azariah Thomas and Quintez Stiggers. I didn't like Will McDonald coming out that much. I thought he surpassed what I thought he could be. But at this point, he's still like 230, 240 as an edge rusher. And if you're going to be running a lot more even front schemes, you're going to have to basically make him a designated pass rusher type player and have Michael Clemon be that early down player, who was a player I did like coming out of Texas A&M, but I also agreed that he would be like a lower end, like run stuffing edge guy. So you're going to be able to play off of that a bit more. Jermaine Johnson's coming off a major injury. I think it was an Achilles injury, I believe. So like he was good. When his half a season where he was trying to pick it up a bit at the end there, and then he popped it at the beginning of last season. So if he can get back on track, I could see it. But I think he's more of a secondary rusher type player. You don't want him to be your number one edge type guy. And I have, like I said, I don't think I have much of any faith in that D tackle spot opposite Quinnen Williams. So despite there being talent in that front four, I'm not a big fan of a lot of guys outside of Williams, specifically for this upcoming season. And I do like their linebackers. I think the the Jets, I keep calling the Lions because I've compared them to them so much. But those linebackers are going to be a lot of work. And we saw last year the Lions worked in like 7 or 8 linebackers because there were so many injuries there, because they like those guys playing almost all the snaps, and it's a trigger downhill run game. I do think that they're going to be good against the run, but their pass rush is going to be lacking outside of maybe Quinn Williams and Will McDonald. And then they're going to try to control the ball, run offense, keep the ball on their side, and then when they finally have to give it up to the other team, stop the run, get the ball back as quickly as possible. But against teams like the Bills, Dolphins, even though you have a good secondary, I just don't think they have the horses up front to complement that to the point where you're going to not be able to play complementary football. So I agree. I think they're a couple pieces away on that front seven, specifically along their D line, to really complete the whole puzzle. But they also have, I'm not a Justin Fields truther. I think they probably wouldn't, if they got the number one overall pick, it'd have to be like Arch Manning if he came out, or Cade Klubnik, like a quarterback that they can finally put some future stock into. I'm not the biggest Breece Hall guy, never was, and even after his injury, especially not. I do think he's been struggling to catch back up to where he was. He just hasn't looked the same. Braylon Allen is going to be their inside the ground pound guy, but they have pieces there that can work in the system they're going to run. It's going to be, can those pieces take the next step? Are they going to be able to return to what they were pre-injury for some of those guys who missed because of injury? And I just think they are lacking high-end talent in positions that they're going to want to lean on in the type of offense they're going to be running.
Do you think the Jets are only a quarterback away from contending for the playoffs? Either of you?
I gotta say no. I mean, like I said, the defensive front seven's a problem.
I think no, just a quarterback wait, and if they traded for, I don't know,
if can they, from a draft standpoint, if we were to put Cam Ward on this team, just plop him in, no other changes.
I think they would need. I think what they need to do is next draft cycle. They need to invest in the ancillary pieces because they have Justin Fields on a 2-year contract. So they need to invest in D tackle number 2, Peter Woods, wink, wink, and nudge, nudge. Maybe another edge. It could be a number 1 guy like TJ Parker, like Parker was saying, or in maybe even another corner that could be like if you're not in love with Azariah Thomas after year 1, you could definitely maybe a shutdown safety. Like I think Caleb Downs is the guy who's top takeaway here. Also, we kind of glossed over, but their wide receiver depth, as Steve was saying, isn't the best. Like they have Garrett Wilson, but then it's Malachi Corley, who's unproven, Alan Lazard, Josh Reynolds, who like you love as a wide receiver 4 or like a 3B, but you're not loving them as your go-to wide receiver 2. There's a ton of pieces where they can add talent. And then after they do that, you can maybe ask me this question. I'd be like, sure. I think if they added a quarterback, they'd be good. But I think they're 2 draft cycles away from being that team that if they added a young quarterback, they could be a danger to the rest of the division.
So according to the Jim Wicken's theory of building a team, if you're a new head coach, you have to get a quarterback within your first 2 drafts. So even if Fields is on a 2-year deal, 2026 is the year of the quarterback for the Jets. I can't think of too many coaches that did not draft a quarterback in their first 2 years with the team that did well. Right? Like the quarterback is kind of married to the head coach.
Yeah, I agree with that philosophy for sure.
Right.
And I even was talking with Drew the other night about how it's a shame that Mike McDaniel's career is tied to Tua Tagovailoa, where Mike McDaniel and maybe moving some pieces around and being in a different structure. Maybe, if you give him the Chargers talent pool or even a team like the Jacksonville Jaguars, like what could he have done with them? But if you get rid of Tua to try and get Mike McDaniel a better quarterback, then you're going to lose Mike McDaniel too. So it's really just waiting for both of them to be out of town when realistically Mike McDaniel could probably do a lot with a different quarterback situation, but that's just not how the world works for some reason.
So, and I followed that Parker when I drafted my shadow team. I picked up Jalen Milroe. And the Seattle got him, what is it, Mike McDonald?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. So Mike McDonald drafted a quarterback in his second year as a coach. Right.
So it doesn't matter where in the draft for you, Jim. It's just if they have to take a quarterback by year 2.
You have to take him, and generally speaking, when you take him, he should be your guy. That doesn't mean he has to start immediately, but you have to have a plan at quarterback. And just if you're a new head coach, if you come in without a plan at quarterback, you're not going to be a head coach for very long.
Well, if you're in this situation, if you're Aaron Glenn, you're like, I have 25, 26-year-old Justin Fields. I'm going to build up this roster. We'll see if he went 4-2 his starts as a Steelers quarterback. Maybe we can pull a little bit out of here. We got this new kind of younger guru type offensive coordinator coming into our roster. He's basically Ben Johnson 2.0. Everyone keeps talking about him over in Detroit, so let's bring him in. We have this guy who has gobs of potential, who's still like just barely past like draftable age because he came out so young. That like, okay, is that not our first swing at quarterback there? We have him on a multi-year deal, and then okay, now we can spend this past draft class getting Armamembu, getting some pieces in the secondary, and build up some of those pieces. And then this upcoming draft, grab a D tackle, grab a wide receiver, grab a safety, be able to build up all those other pieces. And then by year 2, you're like, all right, well, Justin Fields is crap. We're still not like we're competitive, but we're not getting over the hump because we can't win games with this quarterback. And then the next following season, maybe Arch Manning doesn't come out that year for the draft class, or you have whoever else comes up in the meantime. That's where you take your shot, because you've also seen teams that took over and wanted to get their quarterback, but they had to wait till the time was right because they can sell their coach or their owner on, okay, we have this assessment of our roster right now. This was a bad team last year. We can come in, we'll bring our guys in at first. If we don't win year 1, that just means we need to bring more guys in. bringing a quarterback in isn't gonna fix this.
So I think the most important thing year one is to establish a culture. It doesn't matter what the Jets' win-loss record is. It really doesn't. Aaron Glenn has to establish the culture that he wants. You would then draft a QB to come into the culture that you've created. That's my theory. And I could point to a lot of different situations, like even Tennessee. Callahan was in his second year as a coach. And because the scouting cycle is not the same as the coach hiring cycle, right? The scouting cycle is May to April, but the coaching cycle is January through December. So when you're a new head coach, you're actually 4 months behind on the scouting cycle. Right? Like, so you have to, it's maybe better to sync. So the team building happens in the first draft. So I'm not suggesting that the Jets could only draft a quarterback and be okay. This is going to be a heck of a defensive line draft. It's based on what I've seen with the boards that have been shared with me for summer scouting. I'm really curious to see how people triage the wide receivers. Like, is the day two group really that good? And then the second thing is, are we really talking about 110 defensive linemen with a draftable grade between tackle and edge? Is it really like that? So those are the two things I'm looking forward to. But that's another topic for another podcast. Parker, do you want to let the fine audience know about you and all of your shadow teams?
Yeah. I'm the shadow team, what's the word? Preacher, the shadow team preacher, trying to get everybody involved.
Evangelist. There we
Jim,
go.
yeah, there you go. Jim just gave my team the kiss of death because I didn't take a legitimate swing on quarterback until year 3. So I might as well just sink the ship already. It's over. It's done. It's done for. It's done for. I'm getting fired here real soon. Don't worry. But yeah, no, you can follow me on X or Twitter, whatever, at ParkerBlake60. I post all my shadow team stuff there, my draft takes, my random thoughts about food, anything that I do article wise goes on there. Just go follow me. I post everything there. I just kicked my YouTube channel off again for this cycle this week. So go find me there. If I remember what it's called, I believe it's Coach Blake's Breakdowns on YouTube. Dropped a couple of just shadow team recap episodes this week talking about the draft hauls and what I'm looking forward to on this upcoming season. And then we're getting into prospects starting next week. But yeah, and then obviously you can find me here on the Draft Professors whenever Jim is, willing to put himself through having me on another episode.
Oh, you'll always be able to come on another episode. Always. You want to let everybody know about Weekly Huddle and all of your other content?
Yeah, of course. So just first off, thank you, Jim, for having me on here. As always, it's a pleasure. I'm here with Jim every Monday and Wednesday leading up to the start of the season, where we're talking on Mondays, going over whatever schools we want to touch on for that week. This past weekend was Virginia Tech. This upcoming week is going to be Michigan State. And then after that, we have a plan for episode for the MAC as an entire conference. So you can look forward to that as someone who worked for a MAC team in the scouting department and then is just a fan of a MAC team specifically is going to be something I'm very interested in. I have a long list of like 20 players I sent into our group chat to be able to that I'm watching, getting preparation for that. So that's really exciting. And then on Wednesdays, obviously, we do the schemes and the player fits for specific teams. But when the fall comes around, me and Newt will be doing our full D-tackle and edge breakdowns every week. We'll be doing 8 player profiles, scouting players as the season goes on, and just giving you our thoughts, opinions as we did this past season with our D-tackle and D offensive line ranking. So look forward to that. And speaking of Newt, I have him. He's over at the Weekly Huddle YouTube channel, where I post a lot of my stuff, where he is doing his summer scouting series for me, where this week he's going to be posting out his top 10 tight ends. So far, we've done quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers. I have my own personal stuff I'm going to be doing there when it comes to breaking down some film on players, both in the current draft class and past draft classes, try to see where we missed or hit on players in those past years. And then also, I'm going to be doing a playoff predictors and having Bill Sparks come on. And we're going to be doing our first ever 2026 draft, mock draft there. So that'll be coming out soon as well. So over at the Weekly Huddle on YouTube, you can catch me there. At Twitter, at Weekly Huddle. I post a ton of my opinions there. You can get all the updates from my YouTube channel there as well. And like I said, here on the Draft Professor, Mondays and Wednesdays. So I have a ton of content going out, and you can catch me if you're not tired of hearing me talk about football. You can catch me on all those different places.
So, and I checked out Newt's wide receiver episode on the Weekly Huddle. Literally, that was my warm up for this podcast because, I can't get enough of this either. So you can follow the channel right there at NFL Draft Fanatic. No, I am Fanatic. It is the same on YouTube as it is on X, and now you can catch Mrs. R Relevant on Spotify. So if you want to hear the audio of this, you can, put it on Spotify and listen to it on your way to work. So want to thank everybody that pointed out, here's how you add it to Spotify. But similar to what Owen said, we have daily draft content. So Draft Professor is daily draft content. We will have a podcast every day on the draft from now until April. Mondays and Tuesdays, we're breaking down specific universities. So Monday is Michigan State. Tuesday, I believe, is South Carolina. I think Parker might be on that Tuesday group as we start to get our podcast lineup set. Wednesdays and Thursdays, we're doing scheme fit. So today was the Bengals and the Jets. The next week would be the Patriots. And I guess we've got to go out west and do Denver. So Patriots and Denver next week. And then Fridays, we break down quarterbacks. So that's Durst, Bill, Anthony, and whoever wants to guest appear, breaking down 5 quarterbacks at a time. And we are repeating this through the summer until we run out of quarterbacks and until we run out of football teams. And then we got to come up with some other sequence to keep us busy in the month of August. But I know what that is, but you'll just have to keep tuning in before I tell you. That's what's known as a tease. I learned that from Owen. Cool. But for Parker, Owen, myself, for the 80 podcasters at the Draft Professor, thanks for watching tonight, everybody, and we'll see you on a podcast again tomorrow.